very important, because how something starts is generally going to be how it ends. And it's important that we be able to evaluate relationships and determine whether relationships are good and bad for us. Remember, the only relationship that you really have to have is a relationship with God, and you got to have a relationship with yourself. All these other people are optional. And in addition to being optional, the types of relationships that you have with them and how long you have those relationships or how much time and effort you want to put into them, that kind of stuff is flexible and optional too. And it has to be that way. One of the things I like to encourage people to do is focus in on businesses, because businesses show you how to have relationships and what the evaluation process should look like. For instance, if you wanted to have a relationship with a bank, you wanted to borrow money from them, they have a process. They don't just loan money to everybody. If you wanted to work on a job, they have a process. They don't just hire any and everybody. In fact, the department that you go through on most jobs is called human resources. So they look at people as assets, and we have to do the same thing. We have to see people as assets. And not everybody's equal when it comes down to relationships. Some people can help you and some people can hurt you. Relationships are about giving and they are about taking. So it's giving and receiving. So it's always that balance. We have to look at a relationship on that accord. We can't just look at what we're giving, because sometimes we may have to, receive. And what are we going to receive for these people in return? Also, when we're giving, how much are we being asked to give? And so what does that process look like? And we have to consider that carefully so everybody's not mad and angry at the end or upset. And if you have to sever a relationship, we'll talk about the end of a relationship and what that looks like. That's fine, because nothing on this planet is going to last. All your relationships going to come to an end. Whether you walk away, okay, whether you die, whether they die, they're going to end. So that's part of that journey as well. But the first part of that journey is, what does the evaluation process look like? Well, in order to figure out whether a person's going to be right for you or not, you have to know yourself. You have to know what you need and where that person can fit in your life. And as a resource, you only have so much space. Okay, you can't hang out with 15 people in a day and there's 24 hours in a day. And no, you don't have 24 hours, because 8 of those hours are going to be spent sleeping. Another 8 hours are going to be spent working. That's 16 hours. So now you got about 8 hours between cooking, between using the restroom, between time for yourself, and then finally time for other people. So we have to be smart about that process. And how many people can we fit into that 8 hours? And also, how demanding are they going to be? Because some people, they want all your time, okay, when that's just not realistic. It's not realistic for anyone. So one of the first things you want to do when you're looking at relationships, you have to make sure you're healthy. Then the other thing you have to do is make sure that the other person is healthy too, that they have healthy expectations, that they're not expecting more out of you than they're willing to give you. Or it's got to be some kind of balance in it, because you're never going to get 50-50. Okay, you're never going to give them as much as they're giving you. Relationships don't kind of work that way. They're kind of a little bit, sometimes you give a little bit more, sometimes other people give a little bit more, and then all those relationships balance out. So you have to figure that out with a person. And a lot of that comes down to looking at a person's history. Okay, that's a big part of it. Now, you can't just use history, because people aren't, they change. And so you don't want to be looking at a person and you're thinking, well, in the past they've been so great and now some stuff has happened. Like, I've known people when they talk about their marriages and stuff, and they'll be like, well, yeah, it was a great marriage until, their son got drowned. Okay, well, that has to be factored into it now. So, there are current things that impact how people do. And then also, there may be people out there that they may have bad credit in the past, and you may say, well, I don't want to get with that person because they got bad credit. Well, you have to sit down and you have to talk to them, because at some point in time, they may have learned a lesson, and they may be a great person for you, okay, if you give them a chance, okay? And their history of their past is not who they are now. So there's a process that goes into that, okay? Part of that process is not leaping too fast, sitting down and talking to people, being honest with them, sharing with them, watching how they share with you, looking for red flags, seeing if there's something that might pop up that may give you an indication. Okay, remember, in any relationship, there's a starting process where it's trial based. I always think about HR, human resources. When you go to a job, okay, they got a process. There's an application there. Okay, on that application, there's questions. Okay, and if you don't fill out that application correctly and don't answer those questions, guess what? They don't hire you. Okay, we have to do the same thing with our relationships. We have to ask questions, and if people don't want to share and don't answer those questions correctly, you shouldn't hire them to be a part of your life. Okay. In addition to that part of the process, okay, there's that interview where there's the sit down and the talking. Okay. Then there has to be an agreement on salary. Okay. They have to agree to accept the salary on the job. The job determines how much they're willing to pay. That's the same thing in a relationship. You have to determine what you're willing to give for what you're going to get. And that needs to be spelled out to both people. Okay. And if people are not capable of doing that, they're not going to be ready to be in a relationship with you. Don't commit yourself to stuff that's not going to work, that's going to be head knocking and headaches and challenging. You're trying to beg somebody to do what's right. You don't have to beg anybody. Okay. Have self-respect. Okay. At the end of the day, if they can't meet your needs and you can't meet their needs, there's a passage in the Bible, Amos 3:3. How can two people walk together lest they agree? Walk away. Okay? You'll walk away anyway because you guys are going to be walking in different directions. You're not walking together. So that's an important part of the process. You need to sit down and you need to figure out what that salary, what that compensation package is going to look like. Okay? I love that HR analogy because all of us have interviewed for jobs, all of us have worked on jobs. We understand that process. Okay, so everybody has the skill sets it takes to pick healthy relationships because we've all went through that HR process and we know what it looks like. Nobody just brought us in and we didn't know what we were getting and they didn't know what they were giving. Okay, we knew from day one when we started that job how much they were paying. Okay, and so you have to understand every aspect of that. What does the time frame look like? How much time are we going to spend together? What are we going to get from the time that we spend together? What resources are we going to share with each other? Okay, if a person can't understand you or they're very demanding or they're critical, because sometimes people, they don't see the good things you do. Don't keep bamming your head against the wall saying you don't understand me, you don't get it. I don't see why, no one sees how great I am. Okay, if people can't see how great you are, they're not for you. Go find someone who can see you and see how you're moving. Okay, that recognizes the quality and the stuff that you bring to the table. Okay, if you're a woman and you're cooking for a man, you're bringing him food to his job and stuff, you're taking time out your day to encourage him and nurture him and telling him how great he is, and then he's always attacking and criticizing you and always coming up with one more thing that you can do and complaining about you and stuff. Don't put up with that. You don't have to do that. If you're a man and you're spending money, okay, and time and energy with a woman, you're washing her car and changing her tires and stuff, and she's always talking about, well, you didn't do this, or I don't like that, or when something happens between you and someone else, she's taking that time she always sides with everybody else and never sides with you. Don't put up with that, because if she's siding with everybody else, she's trying to fix you. You're a project to her, and so she's never going to agree with you. So if you're in your family, someone in your family mistreats you and she's like, oh, look at it from their point, da-da-da-da kind of thing, that ain't for you. This person does not value you. Okay. Now, if she's seeing the situation correctly and she's trying to help you, embrace and accept that. But if everything is your fault, okay, everything in all your relationships, and no one else is wrong but you, okay, that's not realistic for relationships. In relationships, it takes two to tango. I've never had a relationship where I've never not been at fault. I've never had a relationship where the other person has never not been at fault. We're both at fault. That's why it's called a partnership. That's why it's called a relationship. We're both responsible for what happened and how things went down. Okay, I didn't say things the right way. you didn't take it the right way either. We both have to own that. It's not all just on me to fix. You have to help fix it too. A lot of times people want you to do everything. That is not a healthy relationship. So, you have to understand that evaluation process, okay, and look at it honestly, okay? If a person shows you who they are, believe it, okay? Normally you get one crack at that and figuring out who they are. If they step on your toes, they mistreat you, they can't understand or appreciate your value. If it's always just constructive, the thing I don't like about people that always criticize and they never have anything positive to say about you is those are takers. Okay, and the reason why they're not gonna ever compliment you, encourage you, because they always want more. Okay, and you have to be able to spot that, and that's an evaluation process, and that's why you have to have those honest conversations with people to say, hey, let's sit down and talk. What do you want from a relationship? This is what I want. This is what's important to me. And hopefully, they respect that. But if a person's coming in and they're like, well, I don't see things that way. Well, okay, share with me how you see things. I'll share with you how I see things. And if we can agree to accept each other and love each other the way we are, then we can walk together. If we can't, then no. I'm not a project. I'm not going to be fixed by you. Okay, you need to fix yourself. Okay, don't let people, make you a project. You're not someone else's project. Okay, and a lot of times that's what goes on in relationships. A lot of these relationships are dysfunctional like that because they're not based on reciprocity. And the truth be told, okay, if we're with someone, okay, and it's not working out, we didn't do the evaluation process the right way. So if you say, well, they did this and they did that and they're just a terrible person, well, you're terrible at evaluating people because you picked them. Okay, and so we have to take some ownership in that. But I like that HR process because if we look at how businesses do things, that's a good indication of how we should be doing things also. Okay, we should be going through those same rigorous processes. We should be vetting people. We should be asking questions. Okay, we should make sure that person has the bandwidth and the capacity to give us like we plan to give them. And it's not about taking. Okay, so while you're sitting there evaluating this person, a part of your evaluation process is how complete you are. And can you rise to the occasion? And can you do your part in the relationship? Anytime I go to a job and I'm interviewing for a job, I'm a math professor. Okay, and at the end of the day, if they say, hey, we're looking for an engineer, I look at that job and I say, I can't do that job. I'm not going to apply for it. Okay? So that's the way we have to be. We have to figure those kind of things out. It's not just about evaluating the other person. It's about evaluating us and seeing if we can bring to the table what they need, because they're going to need some stuff and they're going to want it. Okay? And we have to be able to give it to them. If we can't give it to them, there's going to be a disconnect. They're going to be unhappy. Okay? And they're going to make us unhappy. So we have to be smart about this. Relationships is not pie in the sky. Relationships are a very serious thing on a business, a professional level. I see people, they go out and they got bad credit. You have to watch people like that. People with bad credit is because they didn't manage that relationship the right way. They didn't understand what their level of commitment was. If they made that mistake in business, they'll make that mistake in their personal life as well. Okay, it kind of manifests in a lot of different ways. The thing about personal life, a lot of times people don't take no accountability. It's always everybody else but them. Okay, and so we have to be mindful of that. Get the evaluation process right. Okay, because if you get the evaluation process right, you're not going to get in over your head, and you're not going to get with somebody who can't compliment you and support your life. And that really is what it's about. There's no good and bad guys in relationships. It's just about a compatibility. Okay, and so we have to start thinking like that, and we have to see relationships as a resource like businesses do. Okay, businesses see all their relationships as a resource and, opportunities for them to benefit while helping other people to benefit. Reciprocity means that it's give and it's take. It's not just all take. Okay, you have to give up some stuff. And so you want to make sure that that evaluation process is a two-way process, that you're looking at them and then you're looking at yourself too. When they tell you who they are, then what you need to be doing is you need to be figuring out, can I meet those expectations? Can I do the things that they're asking them to do? I made that mistake plenty of times. I've looked at people because I like a certain skill set. I'm a guy, so I like beauty. And sometimes I've gotten into relationships with people, and then in the relationship, I realize I can't do this. Okay, they're asking too much. Don't ever say they're asking for too much. They're not asking for too much. They're asking for too much from you. They were asking too much from me. There's a guy out there that could do what they wanted. It just stopped me. I had a misstep. I made a mistake. My eyes were fixated on how beautiful they were, how beautiful their eyes looked, how luscious their lips were. That's what my focus was. Okay? And that focus blinded me and prevented me from seeing that person was not going to be a good match for me. And that causes anger and animosity. And it's difficult to walk away from that because the person is trying to figure out, why can't you give me what I want? And now you're frustrated because they're asking for too much from you. Okay? Somebody else can meet that need. Okay? And then sometimes with relationships, because there's competition involved, there are two men running after the same woman. One of those guys is real thirsty and he's just gonna say whatever, and then when he gets the woman, he don't even want her because he was making promises that he couldn't keep. And that's the same way with a woman. She meets a high quality man, and she starts cooking at the beginning and stuff. If you know you can't keep that cooking up, don't do it. Okay, because at the end of the day, it's going to create frustration and animosity, and you're going to feel angry when that person, is criticizing you and not reciprocating or walks away. Okay, so most relationships are DOA, dead on arrival, and they're DOA because of the evaluation process is piss poor. We got to stop blaming other people and start taking accountability for the people we choose. So at the end of the day, if you're sitting here saying, well, they're a terrible person, well, guess what? That means you are terrible at picking people because you picked that terrible person. And if they were so terrible, how was you so blind to where you couldn't see that at the beginning? Okay, so the lesson for today when we're talking about relationships is the evaluation process. The evaluation process is critical. It is the starting point of every relationship. When we're looking at those kind of relationships, then we have to evaluate. Now, beyond that, there are some relationships that we don't start. God started them. We were born into them. Those relationships have to be reevaluated. Okay, and even relationships that we started, they have to be reevaluated too. The evaluation process is an ongoing process. And so that ongoing process requires communication. Okay, don't just evaluate people and then not communicate with them about what you're seeing. And be honest about things. Okay, don't attack people. Don't say, you're not this or you're not that. Say, hey, this is what I need. Okay, they're all that in a bag of chips to the right person. They're just not. I had a relationship one time, and I told someone, I say, they're a great person, they're just not my person. Okay, and so that's important to understand when you're looking at relationships, is that, sometimes we're dealing with people and they're really great and awesome people. They're just not compatible with us because our lifestyle is different from their lifestyle, or because they're asking too much from us, or we're asking too much from them. It don't take that much for incompatibility to exist. But we do need to be smart about the evaluation process, because if we're not smart about the evaluation process, what happens in the end is people start feeling like they've had the advantage taken of them. Okay, and then we end up being made the bad guy, and nobody wants to be made the bad guy. And there's really not no bad guy. There's just people with missteps and people making mistakes and people just not being compatible with each other. Okay, and that person, they should have been able to evaluate too. The evaluation is not just on you. It's easy for them to say, you're making all these bad evaluations. Well, guess what? Okay, if I'm making all these bad evaluations, if you know so much about evaluations, how you couldn't evaluate that and figure that out from the beginning? That my evaluation process was flawed, and maybe you might not need to get into a relationship with somebody that has a flawed evaluation process. So a part of that process you might want to ask a person is, how do you see me? What are you thinking? Okay, and listen to them. Ask them, what do you, like a lot of times we spend a lot of time asking people, what do you value? What's important to you? What do you want? We need to also ask them, well, how do you see me? What do you think about me? How do you feel about me? Okay. And then on the back end, we need to evaluate, and we need to also understand that they're evaluating. And don't cheat on the evaluation process, because a lot of people cheat on the evaluation process. Let people see the real you so that they can make a real decision, because it's not fair to people for you to be talking about they're poor evaluators and they should know what they want when you deceive them. Okay? And likewise, be careful with people. Okay? And understand that in that evaluation process, that people may be trying to deceive you. And so if you spot that, then you need to move away from it, because that person doesn't respect relationships. Okay? They're just a taker. They want things. They like the big muscles. Okay? Men like the big booty, like the luscious lips. And that person, that's all they want. They just want the luscious lips and the big booty. And guess what? That's a taker. Okay? Because they don't concern about what they got to give, because they have no intentions of giving anything. They have intentions of taking. And so that evaluation process is at the beginning of the relationship. It's reevaluating and continuing to evaluate throughout the process. We always have to be thinking about, what's important to us, what we can give, and what we want to receive from relationships. And if we do that the right way, a relationship is meant to complement your life. Okay, a relationship can't be your life. Someone else can't build your life and be your happiness. That's your own responsibility. What they're supposed to do is not get in the way. Okay, and they're supposed to join you on your journey and contribute somewhat to your journey. Now, another thing that I use when I look at relationships, I look at banks, and I look at how they borrow money and then they give you interest, or how they loan money and then you give them interest and you give them the money back. Now, the big thing about that is the principal is like life. Okay, so whoever the principal belongs to, that's their life. Okay, you don't get to keep someone else's principal. You got to give them the principal and the interest. So the interest might be 8%. Okay, so somebody that you're, husband or wife or anybody that you're relating to, okay, they may have an 8% stake in your life as far as contributing. So it's not their job to pay all your bills and all that stuff. If they're the provider or the breadwinner, it's their job to do some of that stuff. Now, at the end of the day, if you're in a relationship where one person is working outside of the house, the other person's job is to work inside the house. Be fair, do your share of the work. So if you've got someone in there, and I'm not going to say husband, because sometimes the wife is the one that has to go out and work. If you got somebody that's working, clean that house. Okay, wash that car. Okay, wash the clothes. Do your share in the relationship. Don't have them taking care of 100% of your life, and then you're sitting there watching TV all day. That's a slave. That's not no relationship. So let's be mindful of those kind of things. We can build relationships that will help us out and will be a great asset and a value to us if we evaluate correctly and we make sure that understand that other people are evaluating us as well, and we follow that. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today on our relationship God's way. So at the end of the day, if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you got something you want to share about relationships or something you feel I missed and didn't cover, drop it in the comment section. Also, share this video with friends and family or someone you think might benefit from it, okay, so that you can help me feed the algorithm. All right, guys, be blessed. Have a great Sunday.